Draft. I saw a note earlier today, Russell Brown, Russ NFL Draft on Twitter. Cover1, also at Cover1, mentioned that he's waiting and see what happens, and they have all declared for the draft. Russell, thank you for your time. Craig, Paul, I'm David Smoak. Your thoughts about, let's start, if you don't mind, with the local guys from TCU. Quentin Johnston, the TCU wide receiver.
Yeah, I mean, it's first and foremost, I will say I appreciate you guys taking the time, letting me come on and talk a little draft. But, yeah, Quentin Johnston, all signs have pointed that he's declaring for the 2023 NFL Draft. He has not made that official on his social media pages yet, but with sources and people close to the TCU program, the expectation is that he is declaring for the draft and has declared to the draft with today's deadline. So with him, I mean, he's got the potential and the size and the makeup to be a true number one receiver and potentially the top wide receiver in this year's draft at 6'4", 210. I mean, he's, first team all Big 12. He's led TCU in yardage and receptions, and he's a true X receiver at the next level. What I love about him is what he can do after the catch. I mean, to see a 6'4" receiver have the ability to move in the short and intermediate areas on the field and to be able to make those wide receiver screen plays like we saw him do against Michigan. I just love what he can do. Now, I do wonder what happens when he does get pressed from time to time and what's going to happen with him laterally when he has to fight off press and things like that. But Johnston, I love the skill set. I do think there's top 10 potential with him. And I think there's plenty of teams within the top 10, top 15 of this draft that are really, waiting for the opportunity to get him to talk to him at the combine and really get an opportunity to draft.
Where do you see Tre'vious Hodges-Tomlinson falling in that, as he's the Thorpe Award winner, but, I mean, there are obviously questions about his size.
Yeah, I mean, he's a good player, though, and I just wonder, does the tape do enough justice to say, hey, this guy's a top 50 pick? I mean, 5'9", 177 is where he's at, and I will wonder if he checks in a little bit under 5'9", or maybe a little bit as far as 175, or if he's in that 180 range, there's really no worries as far as weight. He plays physical, and that's kind of his DNA, right? He's a physical ball player, and he comes from that bloodline of NFL players that transition to the NFL. So I think there's a role for him at the next level because we see so many nickel and dime packages in the NFL for defenses today. So I'm not too worried about where he might play. Sure, you can't maybe justify taking him in the first round because he's not going to be able to play out on the outside as much because of the lack of length that he might have or size. And some of the missed tackles are there as well. But again, speed, and he's a technician. He is very good in man coverage. I think he can do a really good job in zone coverage from time to time. I think the versatility is going to be key. I love versatile players, and I think that when you can play them outside, in the box, in the slot, over the top, maybe a little bit as a safety from time to time. And with that athleticism, he can make up for him if he was in a kind of a cover one type of look. So I really like his skill set. Again, I think he's a top 50 type player, and I would be a little surprised if the NFL thought otherwise.
Russell, going back to Quentin Johnston, now we've seen Jordan Addison officially declare. I think Quentin now has put out a statement, so that's officially official. Obviously, there's a lot of other names as well, but where does Quentin kind of fit in the higher pecking order of the wide receiver prospects as of this moment?
Well, I think just with his tape, he's done enough to justify being either wide receiver 1 or wide receiver 2. It just really depends on the flavor of ice cream that, an organization is looking for and really what evaluators and scouts think. And for me, the flavor that I like, it's Jordan Addison. I like him as wide receiver 1 personally. I think what he does, laterally within his route running ability, what he can do in the short and intermediate areas of the field, especially down in the red zone, he's able to create so much separation within his routes and his route stems where I think he can really transition to the next level and be a true number 1 receiver. So we'll see what happens with him as he goes through the draft process. But I really think that those are the two guys kind of neck and neck for that top wide receiver position spot. I would say Jackson Smith and Kayshon Boutte would be in that conversation. But because of just how this year went for them, Jackson Smith didn't play a bunch. I think there's some concerns with the groin and really, you missed a couple games with a groin injury, we understand, but it just kind of felt like he had kind of a weird year where he wasn't really around the team, wasn't around the facility. And it's like, hey, if you're going to opt out for business purposes, just come out and say that. I think that would hold a little bit more value. But when you're not around and you're not practicing, there's that kind of concern. But with Kayshon, there's some off-the-field stuff as it's kind of pointed to with the LSU program, so we'll see how that matches up. But there's a lot of talent with both those players, and it wouldn't surprise me if those were the 4 best receivers in this draft, and they ended up kind of going 1, 2, 3, 4 in really any particular order.
TCU's going to have a bunch of guys drafted. One of them, Kendre Miller, the running back. I remember back when he was a young freshman high school player at Mount Enterprise, and he turned into a heck of a career, played all sorts of positions there because they needed him to. And he surprised me. He really was just really good at TCU. Your thoughts about Kendre Miller?
I love his skill set. I really do. I love players that go out and they play multiple sports in high school, and that's exactly what he did. He ran the 100-meter dash. His PR was 11.52 seconds. He also had some really impressive junior and senior highlights against Alto down there in Texas, where he had 17 points, 16 rebounds, 6 assists in one particular game that I watched last night of him. But I love Miller. I love the skill set that he provides, and I think he's one of the 5 best running backs in this class. That's not here for a hot take or anything like that. I genuinely believe that he has the ability in whether it's a spread offense or just a simple under center type offense where he's following a fullback through the hole. He's got this one-cut ability and this burst through the second level with really good patience and vision and just this contact balance that I love. And I love players that can absorb hits, and at 6'2", 218, I think he's a day 2 type of player. And I think, maybe he falls under the radar a little bit, similar to former Florida Gator running back last year, Dameon Pierce. He goes in the 4th round to Houston, becomes a pretty good pro. I think that's kind of a similar trajectory here with Miller, and I think it wouldn't surprise me if he ends up being a 3rd or 4th round pick, but ends up carving out a role at the next level. So I'm with you. I love his skill set. I'm excited to see him through this draft process, and I think if all goes right, again, he's a top 5 player as far as the position goes.
Where do you see Baylor defensive tackle Siaka slotting?
Well, I'm really excited to see what he provides at the Senior Bowl. I know there's a lot of conversation as far as he can make some serious money down there because of the interior defensive line class. Aside from the guys up at the top, it's a little bit of a weaker class when you get away from Jalen Carter and Brian Bresci and stuff like that. But I think when you look at just the overall size of a player like him, I mean, he is just got so much power at 6'4", 355. I think he's going to be a nose tackle at the next level, but I think he's versatile enough to where he can maybe slide a little bit to maybe that 2-eye position and move around in those odd fronts that we see across the NFL. I will wonder, does he go to the next level and become a little bit more of a pass rusher? Is there going to be any issues there? But when you match him up one-on-one, I think he can take anybody. I think the stuff against double teams will come back and haunt him a little bit. There's times that he loses leverage, kind of gets knocked around. But again, I think he's a really good overall player that's going to find a role at the next level. I think the Senior Bowl is going to do him justice. And when you think of some of the nose tackles that we've seen in prior years, Vita Vea, Danny Shelton, you're hoping that you get one of those types of players that can really become that rotational piece along your defensive line. And if not, hopefully he becomes a stud like Vita Vea.
Russell, we'll try to have you on later. We have, of course, just a little bit of time left in our show, but who do you like better? Is it like, which child do you like the most, Bryce Young or C.J. Stroud?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's Bryce Young just because I think his tape's a little bit more consistent. I love the mobility within his game. He's not afraid to tuck it and run. And I don't have as much concerns when he's pushing the ball vertically down the field as I do with Stroud from time to time. I think placement with Stroud can get a little sporadic. But I do like C.J. Stroud. And if we get the C.J. Stroud that we saw against Georgia, he's going to be a really big problem in the NFL as far as defenses being able to try to contain him. So I hope that's the type of player he becomes. We'll see. But, it's the best time of the year, like I like to call it. I mean, Bryce Young, C.J. Stroud, all these quarterbacks are starting to fall into place. So we'll see if we start seeing 3 or 4 of these quarterbacks going in the top 10 of 2023.
Russell, thank you so much. Cover1 at Russ, again, NFL Draft on Twitter. Russell Brown with us on the names that declared most recently, including those from today: Quentin Johnston, Kendre Miller, C.J. Stroud, plus, of course, another local note with Tre'vious Hodges-Tomlinson. This is 365 Sports. When we come back, Cowboys tonight in the